Hi, today I want to be talking about autonomous coding agents. I will be using something known as RuCode, which was previously known as RuCline, and which is a fork of another popular extension called Cline. So I'll dive directly into this interface. I have VS Code installed, and I would have gone to install extensions and then chosen RuCode. And since I currently have this installed, so I don't need to install it again, I will directly dive into a demo. So I want to use the agentic capabilities, which, if you can notice, mean things like communicate in natural language, read and write files directly into the workspace, run terminal commands, automate browser actions, etc. So think of this as we are looking at the building blocks of something like a cursor IDE, but we are doing this using an open source extension for VS Code called Ru. So let's look at a first example. And importantly, so this has to use a language model. In my case, I'm using Anthropic's Cloud 3.7 Sonnet, this specific version. So I have to mention the API key, which you can create on the Anthropic website. So if I now dive into the first example, so let's say that let us create, you can notice that here I'm looking at the code mode. There are different modes: code, architect, ask, and debug. We'll come on to the architect one also in a minute, but first let's use the code mode. So let us create, or can you create a simple hero.py file in a folder demo and make this folder if it doesn't exist. This just prints the current time. So now I can see that the various things which will be happening in order to process this. It realizes that a folder named demo needs to be created, and it gives you this command which it says that should be executed. So make directory, and the name of the directory is demo. I will let it run the command on my behalf, and you can now see that it has now created this specific directory, and in that you can see that it's now going to create this file called hero.py, and it is imported date time. It's created this new file. It's showing me the changes. So let's first just approve this particular file, and now it will also suggest to run this file. So let us do that, and indeed it runs correctly, and it also shows me that the task is completed. But let's say that I'm not sufficiently happy with this. So I would say that can you use tabulate to show the date time better in a table, and just show date and time in HHMM, and that's it. So let's see. It has to figure out if tabulate is installed, or if it's not installed, it will try to install. So it figures out that it will check whether tabulate is installed or not. So it has to run piplist and then do a grep on tabulate, and it finds out that tabulate is indeed installed, so it doesn't need to install. It will then want us to read this file demo hello.py and make changes to it. So I'll approve the same, and now you can see that it wants to edit this particular file, and these are the changes it proposes. So pretty minimal. The important thing being that now it is importing tabulate and then printing with the help of tabulate with respect of with specifying the headers and the table format. So let's save it. Importantly, till now we have used roughly $0.1 for all of our requests from the Anthropic model. Now it wants to run this, and importantly, now you can see that it's running correctly and it is showing the tabulate response. So this task has now been nicely completed. Now let's look at another task. So it clearly shows that we have the agentic capabilities to run simple Python code and look at the dependencies, install them. So let's start a new task. In this, I want to create a simple one file.html called clock.html, which shows the current time, in big font. Let's also put white background and responsive, and put in demo folder itself. So it will now try to create this .html. Firstly, it understands the user request. So it has nicely summarized: display the current time in a big font, have a white background, be responsive, and update the time dynamically. So it figures out that it needs a simple HTML5 structure, some CSS for big font, white background, responsive design, and some JavaScript to update the time dynamically. So if you notice the created HTML, so because the previous one didn't exist, it has created a new one. It mainly has this content, this JavaScript code of function called update clock, which runs every second, and then it just updates the time. So I will say that let's save this content. And now it will try to create the browser action, and it will want to run this specific HTML to see if it is working correctly or not. Let me approve it. So now you can see that it's opened the file correctly, the HTML correctly, and then it wanted to just summarize what we have been able to do. And I can actually, so it's also suggesting that we can open this HTML using just the open command in my Mac. So let's just do that. And now you can see that it's in a very simple HTML, it was able to create this beautiful looking time website. We can also see that it is indeed seems to be responsive. So thus far we have looked at two simple applications. Now let's look at something which is a bit more sophisticated, where I'll be looking at an existing repo. So this is a repository, which is a Streamlit repository, Streamlit demonstration, which I had created to show the different distributions, continuous and discrete distributions, using PyTorch distributions. So I'll first give a demo of the current app, then we'll see if we want to make some architecture changes to it. So we'll just want to maybe create a new task, and I just want to also remove the demo folder here, so that we are left with just the current folder where this app will run. So I just run streamlit run home.py, and this is showing me the current version of the app. So we click on the different menu bar items here, continuous and discrete. It shows me the different distributions. I can choose and modify the parameters. So it looks fairly good, fairly useful, fairly functional, but it has some challenges. So if we go through the main code, it has this home.py, which is this simple web page in Streamlit, which just shows the title, the markdown, the divider, etc. And then the main content is stored in this config, where we have the config for continuous, where if you can notice that for each of the distribution, I am creating this dictionary which stores the parameters, like the input parameters for the sliders, which we're seeing, for example, for the uniform distribution. We had these A and B as the sliders, and then we are mentioning the distribution function to use, which is toss the distribution.uniform between A and B, and then the support, etc. So while I created this initial design, I'm not very happy with this, because this is not very PR friendly. Let's say if someone needs to contribute, they want to contribute another distribution, they will keep on extending this overall dictionary, and I am sure that they will merge conflicts if a lot of people are working together. So what I'm hoping is that we can perhaps create a better design where each distribution's configuration lies in their own folder. Let's say uniform.py contains this, normal.py contains this, so on. So if someone new wants to contribute, they just touch a single file. They don't want to touch all of the existing files, like one single file. So let's see if this particular agent can help with that. I will move to the architecture mode, and let me just close the app. So let's say in this Streamlit app, I want to make it PR friendly, and let me just close this, and let me just open, let's say, these files and home.py. So I'm just providing more open files as the context for this particular app, or sorry, for the agent. So I think we have utils, config discrete, config continuous, home.py open, and then continuous.py and discrete.py. And let me open the agent again. I want to make it PR friendly. And then I'm mentioning that I have various distribution config stored in config discrete.py and config continuous.py. I would like to shift these two separate .py files like uniform.py, etc. So we'd expect this overall task to be more expensive because this is much more involved. So it understand that it wants to look at these different files, and let me give the access, the read access. I could have also auto approved a bunch of these things, so to read files, edit files, etc. But I will currently not do that because I like to see what all changes are being done. It also wants to read now config continuous.py. So let's allow it to do that. And it's also showing the amount of money required or the total tokens required for each of these requests. It wants to now read discrete.py. So it's figuring out the project structure and how different files, the config files, are being called in the different, for example, discrete.py was calling from config discrete import discrete distributions. So it's now similarly wants to read continuous.py. In continuous.py, we were importing the configuration. So it's now figured it out. Now it wants to read the home.py. Once it does this, it wants to also read utils.py. Now I think it has a fairly good understanding of the app, which is what it's mentioning. It's mentioning config discrete.py and continuous.py contain the discrete distributions and continuous distribution, the corresponding. It also mentions the 2 distributions which are there in discrete and 3 which are present in configuration for continuous. It understands that each of them have things like the parameters, the distribution object, and the support which is defined, and it understands that there are these different discrete and continuous.py which import these. So it contains, it's now suggests that should it be creating uniform.py, etc. It has this now question for us, which is important for us to answer. It figures out, would you like to maintain the same organization of discrete versus continuous but with each distribution in your own file? Or would we want a single import point like an index file that collects all the distributions? Let's say that I would want the first one. So I would say that, yeah, I would like to maintain the same organization of the street. Okay, so it's asking, would we prefer a flatter structure or the same directory structures? I would say the same directory structure. Let's say that we want to do that. Okay, so for the imports, would you prefer a single import point like an index that collects all the distributions? Yeah, so we plan to add more distributions in the future, and yes. So I say that it's really important to make adding the distributions important part of my goal. It still wants one question for the imports. Would you prefer a single point, like an index file that collects all distribution, direct import from each? For now, let's just choose direct imports. We could have chosen either, but for now, let's just choose the direct imports from each distribution file. So now it understands that this is the current structure and this is the new proposed structure. So indeed, the proposed structure is what we were hoping to create. And then it is also suggesting that, for example, for uniform.py, it will create inside config continuous uniform.py, and it will create this uniform equal to this object, which is indeed what we wanted. And we can also create these init files to make them proper Python packages. So it's said that this is the whole plan. And importantly, it's also given us this nice diagram. The Streamlit.am has a home.py, and then the pages we have continuous and discrete. And the continuous would be pulling up the configuration from uniform, normal, log normal.py, and all of which will be on the config continuous. So this looks broadly okay to me. I would say that sure, go ahead. So I don't really want the markdown plan for now. So I'll say that just directly go ahead with the coding. Otherwise, it would have created me a markdown plan. So now it wants to shift to the code mode. Previously, we'd been working in the architect mode. Let's approve the shifting to the code mode, and you can see that it's now moved to the code mode. And importantly, now it wants to create this directory structure. So it will create this, run this command to create this config continuous and config discrete. Let's allow it. It has very quickly created this here. And now it's created this empty init.py. We will just allow them to create. Similarly, for the discrete also, we'll allow to create these init.pys. And now it's creating this uniform.py. And you can see that in very short span of time, it's created this. And it seems to be what we wanted. It will now similarly create a normal.py. And now I think log normal.py. So let's save all of these. Now I think it will go into discrete distribution and create the binomial.py. So we save the same. And now Poisson.py. And now I think it will have to modify some of the imports, etc. So now continuous.py, it needs to modify. So it says that these are the changes it wants to create. Continuous distributions, it's created a dictionary of uniform to uniform. And the different configurations, it's imported one by one. This was one of the questions it had asked. Let's approve this. Similarly, it would want to read the discrete.py, and it will create the same kind of a setup for discrete distributions also. And now it will want to run the Streamlit app, which is Streamlit run home.py. Excellent. Now we can see that the app is running and the port is 8504. So we can verify that the port was 8504. This is what is invoked by our agent. And now we can just verify whether this is working correctly or not. So indeed, it seems to be working correctly as before. And now we have the new architecture also set up in a short span of time. So I will just go to VS Code again and say just to proceed while running. And it says that, so it also now wants to run it on the browser here, and it will want to do its auto checks. Let me for now just reject this because I've manually verified this, so I don't need to check it here. So I'm happy with the app. You may remove unneeded files. and it wants to delete the older files, config continuous.py. So let's just run that. Sometime it gets stuck for a bit. Like here, it seems to be stuck for a bit. But I think this was mainly to show the capabilities of agentic coding. And I think we have looked at this good example now where we have looked at 3 different files. One was a very simple coding experiment where we wanted to create a simple Python file, use a package called Tablet, and it wants to now just do this. Okay, so it wants to say that now we have completed the task and it wants to execute. So okay, let's allow it to just verify the structure that it's created using the ls command. So for continuous, it's containing lognormal.py, lognormal.py, uniform.py, and for the discrete, it contains binomial.py and poisson.py. And it wants to just check if the original config files have been removed by looking at the config folder and if it's empty. So we can also just allow it to check that. We could have also just manually intervened and just stopped at this point. But let's just give it a bit of time to see what it's trying to run. I didn't get the output. Let's try again. So let's just reject this for now. And we can do various more changes now. For example, now in the app, perhaps I can also add the capability to show the density function, mathematical formulation, as well as the mass function. Okay, it's now said that it's okay. This is interesting. It wants to edit the README file, and it also wants to then add some instructions to how to add a new configuration. This is useful, but for some reason this is failing. It's not able to open the diff editor, it says, and not able to. Okay, so perhaps it's trying to write too much into this file. So you can also see that it's not perfect for everything, but it's almost got us where we wanted. For now, let's end this video here and see where we got. So we started with a simple Python file to show the time, and we also checked whether we already have pip installed tabulate. Okay, let us see. So in the second file, we looked at a very simple HTML file which was able to create and show the time. And the third one was much more sophisticated, which needed architectural changes. So we went into the architecture mode, and then we looked at an existing repository. It looked into the context contained in the different files, and then it made certain changes. It also then checked whether those changes are working correctly or not. And now it's the final thing it's trying to create is to make it easy for people to create PRs and to provide different new distributions. So it wants to then edit the readme.md file here. It's facing some challenges for some reason, but I think this is a good point to end this here. Thank you.